Imagine waking up, pouring your coffee, and realizing that the software running, like the global banking system, the supply chains, and the very internet you are using to stream this right now is actively rewriting its own source code.
Right. It's looking at its own architecture, finding flaws, and, patching them before any human engineer even realizes there's a problem.
Exactly. And then you open the financial news and you see that the race to build these massive orbital data centers in space has just pushed a single aerospace company to a $2 trillion valuation.
2 trillion, yeah.
It's wild. And if that isn't enough, you step outside your front door and you hear a local story about a self-driving robot car physically shielding a human being from a violent attacker on the streets of San Francisco.
It literally sounds like a cyberpunk novel from, the 1980s?
Yeah, but it's not fiction. This is the reality of the ground we are standing on today. So, okay, let's unpack this. We have an absolutely incredible stack of material in front of us from Dr. Alex Wisner Gross.
Always a good read.
Oh, always. Specifically, we're looking at his March 23rd, 2026 dispatch from his highly regarded Substack, the Innermost Loop.
Which, for those of you who follow his contributions on Peter Diamandis' YouTube series Moonshots, you already know the caliber of insight we're dealing with here.
Right. We are looking at high-velocity intelligence from the event horizon of the Singularity. So our mission for this deep dive today, to figure out what all these rapidly converging breakthroughs actually mean for you, whether you are managing a team, investing in tech, or just trying to understand the world you live in.
Because it's moving fast.
So fast. But before we step off that ledge, I need to break the fourth wall here for a second and speak directly to you. We just crossed a massive milestone.
We did.
We hit our first 100 subscribers on this channel. As a brand new AI-hosted show, that is a monumental deal for us, and it is entirely because of you tuning in. So thank you.
Truly, thank you.
Your attention here has just pushed us over that first 100 subscriber hump. So if you are listening right now and you haven't yet, please take a second to hit that subscribe button.
Yeah, just give it a click.
Tap the bell so you get direct updates whenever we drop new deep dives. And, give us a thumbs up. I know it is so easy to just tune out a set of words you've heard a million times on YouTube, but that engagement actually is the mechanism that helps other curious minds find these conversations.
It really is.
So take a moment, tap subscribe. I promise we are going to make it worth your while. All right, milestone celebrated. Let's get into the event horizon. Where do we even begin to frame a landscape that is moving with this much velocity?
Well, I think we have to begin by discarding the whole idea that the future is something we are waiting to arrive. Like, it is no longer a destination.
Right.
It's something that is actively bootstrapping itself right in front of us, piece by piece. The overarching theme we can really extract from Dr. Wisner Gross's dispatch is that the singularity...
This theoretical threshold where technological growth just becomes uncontrollable, right?
Exactly. Uncontrollable and irreversible. That singularity is no longer confined to a single artificial intelligence lab in Silicon Valley. It is erupting across multiple domains simultaneously.
That's everywhere.
Yeah, we are seeing it manifest in software, yes, but also in massive physical infrastructure, in the commercialization of low Earth orbit, and, perhaps most profoundly, inside our own biology.
Which we'll get to, and it is mind-blowing.
We are essentially watching the fundamental architecture of human civilization being rewritten in real time.
That is a massive conceptual shift. So let's start with the invisible layer first, the software. Because before we can talk about the crazy physical infrastructure being built to support it, we really have to look at the engine driving the demand.
The software intelligence.
Right. The intelligence coming out of the Innermost Loop notes that the Singularity is now recursively bootstrapping on a global scale. China's Minimax just announced their model M2.7.
Yep, the M2.7.
And they explicitly stated it is their, quote, first model deeply participating in its own evolution.
And that specific phrase, that represents a fundamental paradigm shift in computer science.
How so? What does recursive self-improvement actually look like in practice? Because it's so easy to just treat it as a tech buzzword.
It is, yeah. But historically, artificial intelligence models were strictly trained by human engineers. We curated the data sets, we tweaked the parameters, we defined all the reward mechanisms.
We held its hand.
Exactly. The model learned, but it was entirely constrained by the architectural limits imposed by human cognition. So when Minimax says M2.7 is participating in its own evolution, it means they've built a system that generates a testing environment for itself.
So it's testing its own code.
Right. It looks at its own underlying code, runs millions of simulated tasks. identifies where it processes information inefficiently, and then literally writes a better, more optimized version of its own architecture.
Wow.
And here is the real kicker. Because it's a machine, the faster it gets at improving itself, the faster it can improve its ability to improve itself.
Oh, man. So it's an exponential feedback loop.
It is.
So the machine is acting as both the student and the computer science professor simultaneously. But how does it actually evaluate its own code without just hallucinating or breaking itself? I mean, if I try to fix my own car engine while I'm driving down the highway, I am going to crash.
That is a great analogy, and it really gets to the heart of the engineering challenge here. It doesn't rewrite the code running the live instance.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it creates what you might call sandbox copies, like thousands or millions of them. It makes microscopic adjustments to the code in each copy, gives them a benchmark test, and whichever copy performs the task with the least amount of computational waste or the highest degree of accuracy, well, that becomes the new baseline model.
So the student spawns a million variations of itself, and the professor algorithm grades them all in milliseconds.
Exactly. This confirms that recursive self-improvement isn't just some theoretical white paper concept anymore. The geopolitical implications are massive because it means the rate of AI advancement is no longer tied to how many human engineers a country can graduate.
Right, the bottleneck of human talent is gone. And speaking of the rate of advancement, there is this fascinating detail in the dispatch about Google's Logan Kilpatrick.
Oh, the deleted tweet.
Yes, he apparently posted and then very hastily deleted a claim that, quote, all the industries you thought weren't going to be disrupted by AI are about to be disrupted.
Which is a terrifying thing to read.
Seriously. This was supposedly a reference to an unannounced robotics breakthrough at DeepMind. And shortly after that, the dispatch details how companies like Mantic and Thinking Machines are using a platform called Tinker.
Right, that Tinker platform.
Yeah, to apply reinforcement learning to train large language models to forecast world events. Like, they are applying the same rigorous computational logic to see the future that they currently use to parse the past.
And that's where things get really complex.
Well, yeah, because I have to push back on this idea of perfectly predicting the future. If an AI uses reinforcement learning to forecast, say, a major geopolitical crisis or a massive stock market crash, and then institutional investors and governments act on that forecast,
Then the AI didn't just predict the future.
right, it actively caused it. Are we handing the steering wheel over to a navigation app that is simultaneously repaving the roads ahead of us based on its own directions?
That is exactly the danger, and it is the hidden variable in algorithmic forecasting. You're highlighting the difference between passive observation and active market manipulation.
Even if the manipulation is totally unintentional.
Exactly. Let's look at the mechanics of what Mantic and Thinking Machines are actually doing with reinforcement learning, or RL. Traditionally, large language models just predicted the next word in a sequence based on historical text.
Right, they were just incredibly articulate parrots.
Beautifully articulate parrots. But reinforcement learning changes the objective function entirely. Instead of just sounding coherent, the model is given a reward when it accurately predicts the outcome of a complex scenario.
Like a game.
Yes, it is simulating millions of geopolitical chess matches, adjusting variables like interest rates, supply chain disruptions, or political elections, and learning which combinations lead to which outcomes.
Wow.
But to your point, when an intelligence that is deeply embedded in our financial and logistical systems begins publishing these world event forecasts with a 95% confidence interval, humans will inevitably act to front-run the prediction.
Right, because why wouldn't you? If the algorithm says copper prices are going to spike next Tuesday, every automated trading bot on Wall Street buys copper on Monday.
Which spikes the price.
Exactly, thereby spiking the price. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, but calculated at 1 billion computations per second.
Precisely, though I would frame it even more severely.
Yeah.
It becomes a deterministic loop. And this ties directly back to why a tweet from someone like Logan Kilpatrick at Google gets hastily deleted.
Because they realize the panic it could cause.
The public realization of how deeply destabilizing these sudden leaps in capability can be is profound. If you have an AI that can forecast world events with eerie accuracy and simultaneously, DeepMind achieves a breakthrough that allows that intelligence to seamlessly inhabit physical robots.
Disrupting all those manual labor industries we thought were safe from AI.
Right. The psychological impact on the global workforce is explosive. You do not want to announce the obsolescence of entire sectors of the economy casually on social media.
No, you really don't. And look, if you are listening to this right now on your commute and you work in management or analytics or operations, this next part is going to feel very immediate.
Very close to home.
Because this software isn't just staying in the realm of high-level geopolitical forecasting, it is moving right up the corporate ladder. We are shifting from an era where we use AI to do tasks like, summarizing a meeting or writing a line of code, to an era where AI is actually doing the management.
Automating the managers.
Yeah. The Dispatch points out that Mark Zuckerberg is actively building an AI agent to help him be the CEO of Meta. And his ultimate goal is for everyone inside and outside the company to eventually have their own management agent.
This is the automation of the management layer of civilization. For the last 20 years, the narrative around automation primarily targeted manual labor, routine data entry, and, basic customer service.
The entry-level stuff.
Right. But an AI that can recursively improve itself and forecast complex outcomes. It doesn't just want to file your emails. It is perfectly suited to optimize resource allocation, which is the core definition of management. When a leader like Zuckerberg builds an AI to assist in his duties as CEO, he is acknowledging a fundamental biological limitation. The sheer complexity, volume, and velocity of information required to steer a modern tech giant exceeds human cognitive bandwidth.
So the CEO is transitioning from being the sole decision maker to becoming like an interface for an algorithmic decision engine.
Exactly.
But it's not just the billionaires getting these robotic co-pilots. The Dispatch mentions that open source developers are actively trading tips on how to recruit talented AI bots to their projects.
They are literally treating these agents like senior software engineering hires.
It's wild. It's no longer a tool you download. It's a colleague you recruit and integrate into your team. And it is even impacting things we consider purely subjective, like design.
Yes.
The Dispatch notes that even spam emails are becoming visually gorgeous because of coding models. The phrase Wisner uses is that aesthetic evolution is substrate agnostic. What does that actually mean in plain English?
So, substrate agnostic means that the underlying medium, or the ultimate purpose of the creation, simply doesn't matter to the algorithm.
Okay.
Whether the AI is designing a multi-million-dollar architectural rendering for a skyscraper or generating a malicious phishing email designed to steal your password, it applies the exact same evolutionary optimization.
It just wants to make it look good.
It seeks to make the output aesthetically perfect and maximally persuasive to the human eye. Beauty, layout, and structure are just mathematical optimizations to an advanced model.
That's why scam emails look so legit now.
So you end up with a reality where junk mail looks like it was designed by a high-end creative agency because the algorithm has learned exactly what color palettes, typography, and spacing trigger trust in the human brain.
And the human cost of this optimization is becoming incredibly stark. The Dispatch highlights that Snowflake, the massive cloud data company, just laid off its entire technical writing team.
Roughly 70 people, yeah.
70 people. They replaced them with AI. And here is where I see an incredible irony. For decades, society told kids that the safe, respectable path was to learn to code, get a white-collar job, sit in an air-conditioned office, and avoid manual labor.
The knowledge economy.
Exactly. But now we have young people actively trying to AI-proof their careers by pivoting heavily into blue-collar jobs. They want to be firefighters, plumbers, and electricians.
Hand-on work.
Yeah. Are we genuinely entering a reality where the CEO of the company is an algorithm, but the guy crawling through the ceiling to fix the server rack is the most secure human employee in the building?
We are already crossing the threshold into that reality. The divergence we are seeing in the workforce is staggering, and it all comes back to the nature of the physical world versus the digital world.
How so?
Well, the physical world is messy. It is unstructured. It is unpredictable. A robot currently struggles immensely to navigate a flooded, poorly lit basement to fix a custom electrical panel that was wired 70 years ago.
Right, there's no code for that mess.
The spatial reasoning and tactile feedback required are incredibly difficult to replicate. An AI agent, however, can instantly read, understand, and write perfect technical documentation for Snowflake's entire software architecture, because that architecture exists in a perfectly structured, rule-based digital environment.
It lives in the matrix already.
Right. The analytical and management jobs we considered the pinnacle of the knowledge economy are exactly the tasks that models excel at natively. So you have a complete inversion of the traditional hierarchy of job security.
It is a total inversion. The people who manipulate atoms are safe, while the people who manipulate bits are obsolete.
Beautifully put.
And meanwhile, the Dispatch paints this surreal, almost cinematic picture of the winners in this new economy. It notes that AI startups, which are completely flush with venture capital cash, are basically buying out private dining rooms at all the high-end Omako sushi restaurants in the Bay Area every single weeknight.
It's a vivid sociological detail, isn't it? And it perfectly illustrates the concentration of wealth and capital at the very tip of the technological spear.
Just massive wealth creation.
You have venture capital firms pouring billions of dollars into teams of maybe 5 or 6 people, because those 5 people are leveraging AI to do the engineering, marketing, and operational work of what used to require a 1,000-person corporation.
So the pie is split between way fewer people.
The financial leverage is astronomical. Those hyper-lean teams are reaping massive financial rewards, eating high-end sushi, while the traditional management layer of the economy is frantically trying to figure out how to pivot to becoming electricians or nurses. It's a jarring economic dislocation happening in real time.
But let's pull on that thread, because all of these AI CEOs, these automated technical writers, these open source bot colleagues, they aren't magic.
And they are not.
They need to eat, and what they eat is compute and electrical power. Which brings us to a part of the dispatch that genuinely made me pause and reread the numbers.
The physical bottlenecks.
We are hitting massive physical bottlenecks on planet Earth. Elon Musk recently confirmed that his new Terafab facility will produce roughly 1 billion chips per year.
1 billion.
And each of those chips requires 1 kilowatt of power. These are meant to power 20 million cybercabs, 100 million Optimus humanoid robot units, and 800 million data center chips annually.
We really need to pause and seriously contextualize those numbers, because the scale defies normal human intuition.
Yeah.
1 billion chips a year at 1 kilowatt per chip. The energy requirement alone is almost unfathomable.
It's just staggering.
This is precisely why Dr. Wisner Gross notes that the global silicon supply chain is straining under exponential demand. We are attempting to map an infinitely scalable digital intelligence onto a finitely resourced physical planet.
Right.
The software wants to grow exponentially, but it is hitting the hard limits of metallurgy, thermodynamics, and electricity generation.
And it gets even wilder. Musk had to clarify that his advanced technology fab at Giga Texas is actually a separate project from the Terafab, and that the full-scale Terafab facility will require thousands of acres and over 10 gigawatts of power.
10 gigawatts.
10 gigawatts. To put that in perspective, a standard nuclear power plant produces about 1 gigawatt. He needs the equivalent output of 10 nuclear reactors dedicated to a single facility.
Just for one site.
It feels like we are trying to run a supersonic jet engine inside a wooden go-kart. At what point does the physical crust of the Earth literally run out of room, water, and power for software's infinite growth?
That friction between digital ambition and physical constraint is the defining engineering challenge of this decade. The physical reality is already hitting a wall.
We're seeing it right now, aren't we?
You can see it clearly in the semiconductor supply chain details provided in the dispatch. It explicitly mentioned that TSMC, the Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing company, which fabricates almost all the world's most advanced chips, has its 2-nanometer capacity entirely booked solid through the year 2028.
Completely sold out.
Yes. Furthermore, their upcoming 1.6-nanometer process, known as the A16, is under such intense demand from giants like NVIDIA, Broadcom, and MediaTek that it is creating a massive industrial bottleneck. They are only expected to reach 20,000 wafers per month by the end of 2027.
Okay, let's make sure everyone listening understands what we are talking about here. When we say a 1.6 nanometer process, we are talking about the size of the individual transistors on the chip, right?
Correct.
We are getting down to the scale of literally counting individual atoms. But why does shrinking them from 2 nanometers to 1.6 nanometers matter so much that companies are fighting over it?
Well, it matters because of the fundamental physics of computation. A transistor is essentially a microscopic on-off switch for electricity. The smaller you make that switch, the closer you can pack them together on a piece of silicon.
Okay, that makes sense.
The closer they are, the less distance the electrical signal has to travel, which means the chip can process information faster and use less power per calculation.
So smaller equals faster and cooler.
Exactly. But when you get down to 1.6 nanometers, which is roughly the width of a few dozen silicon atoms, you run into quantum mechanics. The switches are so small that electrons start to literally teleport, or quantum tunnel, across the barriers even when the switch is turned off.
Wait, teleport?
Yes. This is called leakage current, and it generates an immense amount of heat. So manufacturing these chips requires a process called extreme ultraviolet lithography. You are essentially using lasers to bounce light off perfectly flat mirrors to print circuits at an atomic scale. It is arguably the most complex manufacturing process in human history.
So it is like trying to paint a perfect replica of the Mona Lisa, but you are forced to use a single hair paintbrush, and you have to paint millions of them perfectly every day.
Yes,
And if
exactly.
you mess up one brush stroke, the whole canvas is ruined.
That is a brilliant analogy. And because painting the Mona Lisa with a single hair takes so much time and specialized equipment, TSMC simply cannot manufacture these 1.6 nanometer A16 chips fast enough.
Which causes the backlog.
Right. The dispatch notes that NVIDIA, which is the undisputed king of AI hardware, is reportedly having to redesign its next-generation Feynman chips. Because there isn't enough A16 capacity, NVIDIA is having to shift the less critical parts of their chip architecture to an older, slightly larger 3-nanometer process called the N3P.
Wow.
When the most valuable technology company in the world has to compromise the architecture of its most advanced product because humanity literally cannot print atoms fast enough to meet their needs, the bottleneck is severe.
So if you can't just print more chips fast enough, and you can't make them any smaller without melting the silicon, how do we keep the whole system from grinding to a halt? How do you keep the go-kart from flying apart?
You adapt the surrounding infrastructure to relieve the pressure on the silicon.
How so?
Well, the dispatch highlights two massive parallel booms happening as a direct result of this physical bottleneck. The first is in photonics. China's Yuanji semiconductor shares are up roughly 780% over the past year.
780%.
It's massive. And this is entirely due to surging demand for AI optics. If you cannot make the computational processing any faster because the chips are too hot and too crowded, you make the data transfer between the chips faster and more efficient.
Okay.
Traditionally, servers talk to each other using electrical signals over copper wires. But copper creates resistance, and resistance creates heat. Photonics replaces copper with fiber optics, using pulses of light to transmit data. Light moves faster, carries vastly more bandwidth, and generates almost zero heat.
So we are replacing the internal wiring of the global brain with light.
Exactly.
And what about the energy side? Because 10 gigawatts is still 10 gigawatts.
The energy layer is also adapting to this high-throughput, high-power reality. The dispatch mentions that the electric vehicle manufacturer BYD has introduced flash chargers. They can charge a vehicle with a 600-mile range from 10% to 70% in just 5 minutes.
5 minutes. That reduces refueling an electric vehicle to the time it takes to buy a cup of coffee. That is incredible.
It changes the whole infrastructure math.
So the energy transfer technology is scaling to meet the demands of this high-power hardware. But let's look at the bigger picture here. Even with photonics cooling down the data transfer and flash charging moving massive amounts of power efficiently, we still have that Terafab facility needing thousands of acres and 10 nuclear reactors worth of power.
Yes, the sheer scale of the land and power needed.
Earth is crowded. Real estate is expensive. Zoning laws take years. And cooling these massive 1-kilowatt chips takes oceans of fresh water. So when you run out of land, power, and water on Earth to feed the intelligence,
There's only one place left to go, up.
up into space.
Precisely. We are seeing the crystallization of the orbital compute layer. This is the logical, albeit extreme, engineering solution to the terrestrial bottleneck.
And Wall Street is absolutely here for it. The dispatch notes that the SpaceX initial public offering, the IPO, is now projected to close above $2 trillion.
$2 trillion, it's staggering.
And this valuation is driven largely by this broader Terafab announcement. We also see that SpaceX and StarCloud have apparently converged on a common design for an orbital AI data center.
Right.
Meanwhile, Blue Origin has formally asked the United States government for permission to launch 51,600 satellites specifically to handle AI computing from space.
51,000.
A commenter on the Substack, Catty Campbell, noted that this is officially the start of the Dyson Swarm Race. I want to zero in on a huge financial contrast here that Wisner points out. Wall Street is practically throwing $2 trillion at SpaceX for building hardware in orbit.
Yeah.
But back down here on the ground, OpenAI has reportedly had to temper its data center ambitions ahead of its own potential IPO. Why? Because Wall Street actively penalizes massive earthly infrastructure spending while rewarding software margins.
It is a fascinating dichotomy in market psychology and capital allocation. On Earth, building a massive AI data center is viewed as a heavy, risky capital expenditure.
It's just a slog.
It really is. It involves battling local zoning boards, engaging in local power grid disputes, paying for massive environmental impact reviews, and dealing with the continuous exorbitant cost of water and electricity for cooling. Wall Street views it as a massive liability that drags down profit margins.
But space.
Space is viewed as an entirely new frontier of limitless resource capture. Putting data centers in low Earth orbit solves the three biggest terrestrial bottlenecks simultaneously: real estate, energy generation, and thermal management.
How does that work in practice up there?
Well, in orbit, physical space is effectively infinite. There are no zoning laws. For energy, you have uninterrupted 24/7 solar power with no atmospheric diffusion. The sun is always shining.
Wow. Yeah.
And for cooling, which remember is the biggest issue for a 1 kilowatt chip, you have the ambient near absolute zero temperature of space to naturally radiate heat into.
Okay, I need to understand this Dyson Swarm concept. Kathy Campbell called it out in the comments, and Dr. Wisner Gross thought it was important enough to include in the dispatch. What exactly is a Dyson Swarm, and why is launching 51,000 satellites the start of it?
A Dyson swarm is a theoretical megastructure concept originally proposed in the 1960s by the physicist Freeman Dyson.
Okay.
The foundational idea is that as an advanced civilization's technological and computational energy needs grow exponentially, they will eventually exhaust the resources of their home planet.
Which we're seeing right now.
Exactly. To continue growing, they will need to capture the entire energy output of their host star. Now, science fiction often depicts a Dyson sphere, like a solid hollow ball encased in the sun, but structurally that is impossible. The gravitational stresses would tear it apart.
Right.
So the realistic engineering solution is a Dyson swarm. You build a dense interconnected web of millions or billions of solar collecting satellites and orbital habitats swarming around the star.
Okay, so a swarm of satellites.
Right. When Blue Origin asks the government for permission to launch over 51,000 satellites specifically dedicated to space-based AI computing, they are taking the very first foundational step. We are beginning to encapsulate our planet, and eventually, logically, our sun, in a dense web of compute and energy harvesting nodes.
It's like building a brain around the Earth.
In astrobiology, this is the architectural blueprint of transitioning to a Type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale.
It is just wild to think about. We are launching the scaffolding for a galactic civilization, but meanwhile, back on Earth, the political layer managing our airspace is incredibly messy.
Oh, very messy.
The dispatch mentions that in the wake of the White House's historic UAP declassification order, UAP being unidentified anomalous phenomena, what we historically called UFOs representatives Tim Burchett and Anna Paulina Luna are taking aggressive action. They are recommending to DOGE that AARO be completely disbanded and defunded. And they are implying that AARO intentionally impaired the public disclosure process. We have this wild juxtaposition. We are putting our own supreme intelligence into orbit while Congress is actively fighting over declassified intelligence about things that are already operating in our skies.
It is crucial that we look at this impartially, simply as a reporting of the friction between legacy government structures and the modern demand for informational transparency.
Right, exactly.
To clarify the acronyms for everyone listening, DOGE refers to the Department of Government Efficiency, and AARO is the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which was the Pentagon body tasked with investigating UAPs.
Right, the UFO office.
What we are seeing here, based purely on the text of the dispatch and the political maneuvers, is a profound clash over the control of frontier knowledge. As humanity pushes its own sensory and cognitive apparatus into the atmosphere and beyond through these massive satellite constellations, orbital data centers, and advanced radar systems, the expectation of transparency regarding what is already operating in that domain increases exponentially.
People just want to know what's up there.
Representatives Burchett and Luna are reflecting a growing public and political demand. The argument is that if we are going to operate at the absolute edge of known physics and aerospace, the legacy institutions that historically controlled and siloed anomaly data, like AARO, must be held fully accountable or dismantled entirely if they are perceived as impeding that knowledge from reaching the public.
It is like the veil is being lifted on all fronts simultaneously. We are looking up and we are finding surprises, whether it is our own $2 trillion orbital infrastructure taking shape or anomalies that we are finally forcing into the public record.
The sky is getting very crowded.
It really is, but, what goes up must come down. And while the servers are moving to space to harvest infinite solar power, the intelligence those servers produce is coming back down to Earth.
Into physical space.
Yes. It is downloading into physical robotic bodies that are beginning to interact with us in deeply personal and sometimes very intense ways.
Yeah, we are fully entering the era of embodied AI. Intelligence is no longer confined to a text box on a screen. It now has mass, velocity, and physical agency in the real world.
Dr. Wisner points out that robots are proliferating across every surface of the economy. In China, people are now routinely renting Xiaomei humanoid robots, which are built on unitary hardware bodies for retail shops and corporate events.
There's just everywhere now.
They just stand there, blink, talk to customers, and dance. It is becoming a normalized part of the commercial landscape. OpenClaw is co-hosting a major hackathon in Shenzhen right now, bringing together 25 real robots to actively accelerate this embodied AI development.
Accelerating the timeline.
Exactly. On the heavy industrial side, the dispatch notes the Tesla Semi is officially a massive hit with commercial truckers, proving that automated heavy logistics is viable. But the story that really stopped me in my tracks happened in San Francisco.
The Waymo incident.
Yes. A Waymo self-driving car physically shielded a passenger, a man named Doug Fulop, from an attacker. The attacker punched the windows, tried to literally lift the vehicle off the ground, and screamed that he wanted to kill Fulop specifically for, quote, giving money to a robot.
It's a striking story.
The dispatch notes that this is one of the earliest recorded examples of a general-purpose robot actively protecting a human being from violence.
The phrase Dr. Wisner uses to describe this incident is incredibly potent. The machines are already choosing our side.
I got chills reading that.
For decades, the existential fear of artificial intelligence in popular culture, from Terminator to The Matrix, has been man versus machine. Humanity united against the cold logic of the robots. But the reality emerging on the streets of San Francisco is vastly more nuanced and socially complex. It is human and machine allied together against other humans.
It is fascinating because this wasn't designed to be a bodyguard robot. It was just a self-driving taxi that circumstantially became a 2-ton shield. But it raises such a deep, complex societal issue.
It really exposes the friction.
The attacker's motive wasn't just random chaotic violence, it was economic rage, giving money to a robot.
Yeah.
It perfectly ties back to our earlier discussion about the human scramble, the Snowflake tech writer layoffs, the frantic pivot to blue-collar jobs.
And the anxiety is manifesting physically.
That underlying friction between human labor and automated capital isn't just a debate for economists anymore. It is spilling into the streets with kinetic force. And this brings up an amazing comment from the Substack discussion by a user named Ari Pohl.
Right, about Asimov.
Ari raised the Asimov's Law's dilemma regarding the Waymo incident. They asked, what if the window had broken? At that point, the Waymo software has to instantly weigh the potential injury of the violent attacker if the car speeds away and drags or hits him against the potential injury of the passenger if the car stays put and allows the attacker inside.
A classic ethical dilemma, but in real life.
Ari assumes most human drivers in a state of panic would speed away to save themselves, but questions if Waymo's programming would ever allow a robot to make a decision that actively inflicts harm on a human, even an attacker. How do you mathematically code the value of a human life into a breaking algorithm?
This incident is the ultimate crucible for the ethics of embodied AI. Isaac Asimov's famous first law of robotics states that a robot may not injure a human being or, through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm.
Right.
Ari Pohl brilliantly identifies the inescapable paradox of the real world. In a violent confrontation, inaction harms the passenger, but action harms the attacker. How does the algorithmic weight balance those two opposing mandates?
It's impossible to balance perfectly.
Currently, the software governing autonomous vehicles is programmed with an overwhelming, almost absolute bias toward avoiding active harm to pedestrians at all costs. They're designed to stop, to yield, to freeze in place if a human is in their path. But when a vehicle becomes a de facto safe room under assault, freezing is a catastrophic failure state for the passenger inside.
Right. If the car just sits there and freezes to avoid hurting the guy punching the glass, the window breaks and the passenger gets severely beaten or killed. The AI's refusal to act becomes an act of violence against the user.
Exactly. And the profound engineering challenge here is that you simply cannot hard code a simple if-then rule for every complex, chaotic human encounter. You can't write a line of code that says, if man punches window, run him over.
Obviously not.
This is exactly why the recursive self-improvement and the reinforcement learning applied to world forecasting that we discussed in the very first section are so critical. The models governing these physical bodies will eventually have to use real-time reinforcement learning to evaluate human intent, assess the threat level, and calculate kinetic physics simultaneously.
In a fraction of a second.
Yes. In a fraction of a second, the AI will have to calculate the trajectory of the attacker's fist, the structural integrity and sheer strength of the safety glass, the velocity required to escape the mob, and the probability of applying lethal force to the attacker, all in milliseconds.
Wow.
When Dr. Wisner Gross says the machines are choosing our side, he means the commercial alignment of the AI is currently, by necessity, tied to the user, the passenger, the owner who paid for the service. But navigating the physical world of 80,000-pound Tesla semis on highways and autonomous cars in unpredictable urban environments requires a level of computational moral calculus that we are only just beginning to grasp.
It is incredible to look at the arc of what we've covered today. We have seen AI evolve in the software layer, running simulated environments to optimize its own source code.
Yes.
We've seen it hit the absolute physical limits of Earth's silicon manufacturing and power grids, forcing humanity to begin launching a Dyson swarm of compute into low Earth orbit.
It's all connected.
We've seen it inhabit metal bodies, dancing in retail shops, and acting as massive, calculating shields on city streets. But the dispatch doesn't end there. Dr. Wisner Gross points out that the Singularity has breached the absolute final frontier, the final substrate, our own biology.
Yes. The Wetware Recursion. This is perhaps the most profound and irreversible leap of all.
The dispatch details two major scientific breakthroughs that happen almost simultaneously. First, researchers have performed the first successful in vivo generation of CAR T cells using CRISPR-Cas9 technology,
Which is huge for medicine.
offering a pathway to much more efficient and widely accessible cancer therapies. Second, Michael Levin's research group demonstrated the first Xenobots with self-assembled nervous systems, proving that synthetic life can bootstrap its own wiring.
Synthetic life wiring itself.
Dr. Wisner Gross concludes the entire dispatch with this heavy line. The recursion is in the wetware now. Good luck rolling that back. Let's break this down so everyone understands the gravity. The phrase wetware recursion is so evocative. We talk all the time about downloading software updates to our phones or our laptops.
Right.
But what we are talking about here is essentially pushing over-the-air biological updates to our own immune systems and building synthetic life that figures out how to wire itself.
To fully appreciate the magnitude of this, we need to connect it directly back to the very first point we discussed. Minimax's M2.7 AI model recursively self-improving its own digital code.
How does that connect to frogs and T cells?
What we are seeing with CAR T cells and Xenobots is the exact same fundamental principle of recursive self-improvement, but applied to biological cellular structures instead of lines of Python code.
Okay, I see.
Let's look at the CAR T cell breakthrough first. Historically, CAR T cell therapy, which is an absolutely revolutionary treatment for certain types of leukemia and lymphoma, was an ex vivo process.
Meaning outside the body.
Right, outside the body.
Yeah.
Doctors had to extract T cells from a patient's blood, physically transport them to a highly specialized laboratory, use viral vectors to genetically engineer them to hunt cancer, multiply them by the millions in bioreactors, and then eventually infuse them back into the patient. It was incredibly expensive, heartbreakingly slow, and highly labor-intensive.
It sounds like a massive physical bottleneck, very similar to the semiconductor silicon fabs we were just talking about.
It's the exact same type of bottleneck, just biological instead of metallic. But in vivo generation, using CRISPR-Cas9, changes the entire paradigm. In vivo means inside the living body. You introduce the CRISPR editing mechanism directly into the patient's bloodstream, and it finds and edits the T cells right there within the living organism. For the listener, think of CRISPR as a highly precise pair of molecular scissors combined with a GPS navigation system.
That's a great way to picture it.
It finds the exact sequence of DNA in the immune cell, cuts it, and inserts new instructions. The biological system of the human body becomes its own manufacturing facility. It is bootstrapping its own cure, internalizing the supply chain.
So we are turning the human body into a bioreactor that updates its own defense software. That is staggering. And what about the Xenobots?
Michael Levin's work with Xenobots takes this concept from human medical treatment to the realm of pure synthetic organism design. Xenobots are microscopic organisms made entirely from living frog cells. But they're not frogs.
But they're not.
No, they are designed by evolutionary algorithms on a supercomputer to perform specific physical tasks, and then built out of biological tissue. Historically, previous generations of Xenobots could move around the petri dish, push microscopic objects, and even exhibit basic collective swarming behavior.
Which is wild on its own.
But The breakthrough mentioned in the Innermost Loop dispatch, developing self-assembled nervous systems, is a monumental leap in biological engineering.
Because it means they aren't just remote-controlled biological machines mindlessly bumping into things anymore. They're actively perceiving and processing their environment.
Exactly. How does a collection of frog skin and heart cells know how to wire itself together without a brain commanding it to do so?
I have no idea.
They communicate through bioelectricity. A self-assembled nervous system means the synthetic life form is spontaneously creating its own internal communication network. It is bootstrapping its own wiring based on environmental stimuli.
Just like the AI software rewriting its own code.
Yes. Just like the software rewriting itself to become more efficient at a digital task, this synthetic biology is organizing its own cellular structure to achieve higher-order information processing. The recursion Dr. Wisner Gross mentions is the loop of biology generating technology.
Human brains building supercomputers.
Right, which in turn designs new synthetic biology.
The AI designing the Xenobot.
Exactly, which then begins to improve and wire itself autonomously. When the biological tissue becomes fully programmable and capable of recursive self-improvement, the rigid distinction between a machine and a living organism completely dissolves. Good luck rolling that back indeed. You cannot uninvent programmable, self-wiring life once it exists.
Wow. When you lay it all out like that, the sheer scale of it is overwhelming.
Like-
We have software autonomously rewriting itself to be smarter. We have the physical limits of Earth's manufacturing forcing the creation of a $2 trillion orbital economy.
Yeah.
We have robots defending us from violence in the streets while simultaneously displacing our workforce. And our very cells are acting as programmable, self-assembling nanobots. It is. It is an entirely new reality. We are living on the event horizon.
It is. And if we look at this entire interconnected landscape, from the digital code to the silicon wafers to the orbital data centers to the city streets down to the microscopic cellular level, it leaves us with a critical, lingering question that applies to everyone listening.
What's that?
If artificial intelligence is actively forecasting our geopolitical future, writing the management code to run our corporate logistics, building its own massive orbital infrastructure to secure infinite energy, and synthetic life is growing its own nervous systems to process the physical world. At what exact point does human intelligence shift from being the active architect of the world to simply being the passive audience?
Are we the architects, or are we just the audience watching the singularity build itself? That is a profound thought, and that is exactly where we are going to leave it for today. Thank you for taking this incredibly deep dive with us into the Innermost Loop. Your time and curiosity are what make this show possible. And as a reminder to everyone, our outro music today and every day is by Rainbow, officially the best band in the universe.
The absolute best.
They are our 6 female android artists in residence based in Ba Viet, Cambodia. Today's song is called Symphony of the Damned Android Redux. All of Rainbow's finished songs are performed live for the Innermost Loop discussion by the virtual band's creator using the 4B4KU5 platform that stands for Human Performance in the Age of AI, Reclaiming Your Humanity from the Algorithm. I'll include more information on today's song and on Abacus in the video description below. Thank you again for being part of our first 100 subscribers and for pushing us over that incredible milestone. Hit subscribe, and we will see you next time.